It's been nearly 2,100 years since God had walked the earth with man. And the light of this matrimonial garden had all but faded into the distance, and it will be nearly 2,000 more years until that light is once again restored in the heart of man. The heart of humanity now rests uneasily. We see that fear, deception, and an unwillingness to trust in the God of heaven will plague this human family for generations to come. And Abraham's sons will build their lives as a house of cards, ready to topple at any moment. The blessing of Eden gave the family of humanity abundance. The trees were filled with fruit, hearts were filled with love. You see, the abundance of Eden overflowed out into the world and became the blessing of God. That is, until Adam and Eve unleashed a curse upon the ground and upon the evil serpent. You see, the curse shrivels the abundance, and the blessing becomes more and more rare. The blessing becomes rare until it falls upon the reality of one human family. The family of Abraham. You see, we are told that it is through this family that the blessing of Eden will come. But as we will see in our story today, this blessing will not come in ways expected. This blessing will come only in the most unexpected ways and in the most unexpected people, even if God has to bring the blessing through the very snake who tricked the humans in the garden. You see, God will bring his blessing, and it will come through struggle, lies, and deceit. Through the children of Abraham. We find Abraham now old, getting on in years. The Lord had blessed him in everything, and it was time for Abraham to give that blessing to his children. And so Abraham called his eldest servant Eliezer to him, and he commands him that his beloved son Isaac not take a wife from among the Canaanites. But you see, Abraham is getting old, and Isaac must wed soon before he dies. And so he sends the respected servant to the land of his brother Nahor, where he is to search among Abraham's kinsmen to find a woman suitable for Isaac. You see, Eliezer is to go halfway to Babylon. But when Eliezer approached Aram Naharaim, where Nahor dwelt, he found a well there to water his camels. And while there, he began to pray that he would find a suitable wife for Isaac, when before he had finished praying, a woman had started walking toward the well. The woman was the daughter of Bethuel, who was the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother, Nahor. The woman was Abraham's great niece, Rebekah. Her hospitality and kindness toward the stranger was in answer to his prayer. In finding her a suitable wife for Isaac, they excitedly returned to the land of Canaan. It was love at first sight. Though our tale starts out with the bond of a man and a woman, the weight of sin will be ever present for us. You see, when suddenly, at the age of 175, the curse takes over and Abraham dies. And when Abraham dies, Isaac and Ishmael bury him next to Sarah in the tomb that Abraham had bought. Meanwhile, Rebekah, like her own mother-in-law Sarah, is barren. The curse brought upon the ground out of Eden and into her womb. When Abraham and his wife found themselves here, they did what they thought was right in their own eyes. So Abraham then conceived with Hagar. But here, we find a different picture. The blessing of Eden pushed out into the world through Isaac as Isaac prays. The hope of the garden flooding our hearts and our minds. You see, the Lord was determined to fulfill the plan he had set out from the beginning. That from the seed of a woman would come one to crush the head of the snake. He would not let the infertile ground or womb of Rebekah stop the blessing of Eden to come out into the world. See, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples will come from you and be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. And when Rebekah's time came to give birth, there were indeed twins in her womb. Rebekah conceives and bears twins. Abundance, the blessing of Eden. But the first one came out with a reddish hue, covered with hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out grasping Esau's heel with his hand, and so he was named Jacob, Jacob, meaning heel grabber, trickster, grabbing the authority of the older for himself, distrusting the very promises that God had blessed him with, the very characteristic given to the sly, slippery, tricksy serpent of the garden. Now falls the blessing and hope of humanity. Will this lying trickster, Jacob, ruin the plan of God? Or will God bring the blessing of Eden even through the worst of sinners? When the boys grow up, Esau takes to being a hunter, whereas Jacob will live in the tents. Esau is the firstborn male, the inheritor of Isaac's great wealth. Esau is a hunter who tends to the fields and provides food for his family. Isaac loved Esau, but you see, Rebekah loved Jacob. And God chose Jacob, but rejected Esau. If both of these brothers end up alive, it will be purely because of the grace and mercy of God. And so it happened that one day Esau came in from the field after a long day of hunting, and was hungry unto the point of death. "Let me eat some of that red stew. I'm exhausted." That is why he was also named Edom, which means red. "Deal," Jacob replied. "First, just sell me your birthright." "Look," Esau said, "I'm about to die. What good is a birthright to me?" So Jacob said, "Swear to me first." And so Esau swore to Jacob and sold his birthright to him. And then Jacob gave him bread and lentil stew to Esau, and he ate and he drank and he got up and he went away. And so Esau despised his birthright. Jacob grabbed the heel again, tricking his brother Edom into giving up his right to rule over the land. But at that time, there was another famine in the land, just like the one that had plagued Abraham, that had shown him how far we had come from the lush beauty of the garden that was in Eden. And so Isaac and Rebekah and the rest of the tribe moves from their home to the land of Gerar, where an old family friend, Abimelech, still reigns as king. While there, God appears to Isaac and commands the family not to go down to Egypt like Abraham their father had done. God also reminds the family of the promise made to Abraham, saying that the land they dwelt in would one day be theirs, that Isaac's offspring would be more numerous than the stars, and through his offspring would all the nations be blessed. When Abimelech sees Isaac's wife, he sees the beauty of Rebekah. Certainly, Abimelech would never take another man's wife, but Isaac assures the king that Rebekah is just his sister. Like father, like son. Poor Abimelech. When Abimelech sees Isaac caressing the woman Rebekah, he's white as a ghost. But the Lord's hand guiding this family is about to bring the plan he had since the fullness of time. And so, instead of killing Isaac, the mighty king institutes a protection for the family, saying that anyone who touches them will be put to death. Now the family of Isaac grows wealthy and prosperous in the land of Canaan. So prosperous, in fact, that Abimelech asks the family to leave. And though the God of the created order had assured this family numerous times that they would possess this land, they comply and leave Abimelech's territory. But Abimelech, still paranoid over the growing family, comes back to them. He's worried that because they dwell so closely to this land that they will turn on him. And when that happens, he becomes terrified that the God that they will serve will be against his nation. And so, Isaac and Abimelech set up an agreement. They will stay out of each other's way, and no harm will befall the nation of the Philistines because of the family of Isaac, and the Philistines will not harm the growing family. Meanwhile, the sons of Isaac, Jacob and Esau, are growing bitter toward each other. You see, Esau finds a wife among the Hittite women, not of the people of Israel. And he does this so that he would make life bitter for his parents. But by this point, Isaac is so old he can barely see. Isaac's time is coming to a close, and per the family's custom, he will soon need to bless his firstborn son. Well, one day, Esau finds himself out hunting game again, when his mother Rebekah begins to scheme. She believes, for her great love of Jacob, and doubtlessly because Esau has not made his parents' life easy, that Jacob should get Esau's blessing, even though God had already promised that that would be the case. Well, you see, Rebekah is just doing what is right in her own eyes. The plan is simple. Rebekah will clothe her son Jacob in goat skin and make Isaac his favorite food. Jacob will enter into the room of Isaac with the food, and Isaac in his old age will not even be able to tell the difference between Jacob and Esau. And he can't. Bringing Jacob close to himself, Isaac whispers, "May God give to you from the dew of the sky, from the richness of the land, an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you and nations bow in worship to you. Be master over your relatives. May your mother's sons bow in worship to you. Those who curse you will be cursed. Those who bless you will be blessed." As soon as Isaac had finished the blessing, Jacob had left the presence of his father Isaac when his brother Esau arrived from his hunting. Isaac refuses to give Esau another blessing. And there it starts. The hatred that Esau begins to feel for his family growing deep in his heart. We see the light of Cain growing ever more presently in the eyes of the rejected son. When Rebekah says that since Jacob now has the proper blessing of his father and the birthright given to him by Esau, she will loathe her life if Jacob were to marry a Canaanite woman. And so Isaac encourages Jacob to take a wife from their own family and reject the way of the Canaanites. When Esau hears that the Canaanite women would displease his parents, he begins to marry Canaanites almost exclusively. Jacob, on the other hand, is sent back to the land of his forefathers, back to Rebekah's hometown to find her brother, Laban, of the same name as her father. You see, Jacob is sent halfway to Babylon. On his way to the city of Haran, Jacob falls into a deep sleep, where the God of heaven and earth appears to him in a dream. Jacob sees ladders ascending and descending from heaven onto earth as two great cosmic spaces become one again, and the blessing of Eden is unleashed upon the earth. God reminds Jacob of the promises that have been made to his family. His offspring will be more numerous than the dust of the very earth. Jacob will inherit the land of Canaan, and through his offspring, all the people of the earth will be blessed. Overwhelmed by this vision and in praise to the God of his fathers, Jacob sets up stone pillars and calls the place Bethel, or the Lord's house. And from there, Jacob continues his journey when he comes across a well. And while there, he meets shepherds from the east, who are shepherding 3 flocks of goats. And lo and behold, they're from Haran. They know Laban, Rebekah's brother. Suddenly, on the horizon comes a woman. Well, Jacob insists that he stay at the well to water their sheep. And when Rachel approaches the group, Jacob can't help it. He's in love already. He kisses her and declares that this is the woman he had been searching for his entire life. The woman he will marry. And Laban agrees. Jacob is the right man for his daughter, saying, "Surely you are flesh of my flesh." And so Jacob sticks around for the better part of a month, working for Laban. And when the time of Jacob's labor ends, Laban calls Jacob to himself and insists that he pay Jacob for the help that he contributed to the household. Jacob is not interested in money. However, Jacob says that he will work for 7 more years if it means that he will get Rachel's hand in marriage. After the 7 years of labor are up, Laban throws a huge feast for the honored guest, and to consummate the marriage, Laban veils Leah, Rachel's sister, and gives her to Jacob instead. And Jacob lays with Leah and officially marries Laban's daughter. The trickster has become tricked. As Jacob tricked his blind father, so he is tricked with a veiled bride. Well, Laban is sure that this is just not how things are done in his household. The second-born is never given in marriage first. Jacob must work another 7 years to secure Rachel as his wife. And so he does. For 7 more labor-intensive years, Jacob works for the hand of Rachel in marriage. And after working for 14 years for one woman, Jacob finally marries the love of his life. And Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. But when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb and closed Rachel's. Rachel, like her mother-in-law before her, and her mother-in-law before her, could not bear children. The curse of Eden wrapped around the women of this family. Leah, on the other hand, bears Reuben. She bears Simon, Levi, and Judah too. Rachel becomes exceedingly jealous of her sister, and she begins to scheme. Rachel becomes convinced that she knows the right thing to do, and so she convinces Jacob to conceive with Bilhah, Rachel's very own servant. Bilhah bears Dan and Naphtali. Meanwhile, Leah sees that her time for bearing children is up, and so convinced that she knows the right thing to do, she convinces Jacob to conceive with her servant, Zilpah. Zilpah bears Gad and Asher. The rabbit hole is not even ended yet, as one day Reuben, Leah's firstborn son, harvests a good bushel of mandrakes for his mother. And well, it turns out that Rachel wants the mandrakes for herself. And so, in exchange for the mandrakes, Rachel allows Leah to lay with Jacob that night. Leah ends up conceiving and bearing Issachar, Zebulun, and a daughter named Dinah. Finally, after all of this, God opens up Rachel's womb and she bears one son and names him Joseph. The family is so large now that while Jacob still works for Laban, he asks Laban to send them away out of his service so that Jacob can go back to his home country of Canaan. Laban, however, refuses. He claims that through some sort of divination, he has learned that Jacob's God has been blessing his household, and implies that if Jacob leaves, the blessing will go with him. And so, Jacob makes an agreement with Laban. Jacob will not leave, but since he's not working for another one of Laban's daughters, he will take payment in the form of sheep. Since Laban refuses to let Jacob go, then Jacob says that every spotted or black sheep that the flock brings forth will be Jacob's payment for the work. Laban sees this as making sense, and so Laban agrees. But the trickster, he's not out of his old habits just yet. You see, Jacob engineers the flock of sheep so that only the strongest sheep become spotted or black. And by the end, Laban basically has no flock at all. Laban is left with the weakest, most feeble scraps of Jacob's strong sheep. So, what is Jacob to do? He gets up, puts his children and his wives on camels, and they leave. He took all the livestock and the possessions he had acquired in Paddan Aram, and he drove his herds to go to the land of Canaan, back to his father, Isaac. And when one day Laban goes out to shear his sheep, Rachel gets up and steals her father's household idols. Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean, not telling him that he was fleeing. He fled with all his possessions, crossed the Euphrates, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. But when Laban realizes that his idols have been taken, he chases the large family and quickly overtakes them. When Laban catches up to Jacob, he flies into a rage. He begins to search all the tents, claiming that they stole his household gods. Of course, Rachel did, But Laban never finds out. The whole fiasco turns out kind of like a Thanksgiving-style family argument. When finally Laban and Jacob work out their differences, they make a pact with each other. Like Isaac and Abimelech did, Jacob and Laban will not harm each other, and they will each stick to their own territory. They set up stone pillars and call the place Mitzpah. Jacob continues his journey on from the land of Haran to Canaan when they come across Mahanaim, a place, as the scriptures tell us, is a place where God and his angels dwell. Jacob and his household set up camp here. Word has come to Jacob that his kin Esau, Jacob's estranged brother, has been looking for him and is in Seir of Edom. The message is simple and petrifying. Esau is coming for Jacob, and he is armed with 400 men. Jacob sends messengers ahead of their envoy to beseech the brother he hasn't seen in over 14 years. Jacob splits his camp in two in the hopes that if Esau attacks one camp, the other will be able to get away to safety. Finally, one more step is set in motion to ensure Esau's good graces when he inevitably finds the large, traveling caravan of his brother's household. You see, Jacob sends droves of gifts to Esau that will be spread out along Esau's journey, so that by the time Esau finds Jacob, he will have been met with hordes of wealth and good tidings. The plan is set in motion, and as one last safety precaution, Jacob sends his wives and 11 children across the river Jabbok by night so that they might escape the coming battle. When Jacob gets his entire family to safety across the river, he waits in the silence of the night, with nothing but the stars to hum overhead. Jacob waits in eager anticipation for the moment of his brother's arrival. Jacob was left alone. I can't help but to imagine the thoughts that run through Jacob's tired mind in these moments as the minutes slowly tick away. This man had never stopped living in fear. From the moment he was born, he cloaked himself in tricks and schemes until this very moment of his life, where all of his running had finally caught up with him. His family history had finally caught up with him. A history of running, lying, and fear. When suddenly, a mysterious figure emerges from the darkness, looking for a fight with the scrappy trickster, Jacob. See, the man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. The mysterious man, seeing the trickster's stubbornness, punches him in the very place where blessing was to flow from him. Then the mysterious man said to Jacob, "Let me go! It's daybreak!" But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. "Your name will no longer be Jacob," he said. "It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with man, and have prevailed." Let me ask you a question. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Well, that's what happens when God's desire to bless meets Jacob's failure in scheming and autonomy. God says here to Jacob that he has had a way of scheming his way to the top. Though the blessing was his to begin with no effort at all, Jacob has striven his way into the blessing, bringing along with it suffering into the nature of being the servant of God. And so God strikes the trickster, strikes the serpent, to bless the human family. And then Jacob asked him, "Please, tell me your name." But here, the man refuses. He answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. Jacob was given this blessing for no reason other than that it was the will of God since the beginning. Jacob's eyes are then opened, and he realizes that the angel he had striven with, the mysterious man, was indeed God himself, incarnate among men in human form. He calls the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. Quickly Jacob's heart begins to race. Jacob had sent the caravan of the blessing, the droves of gifts, the numerous beseechments, but here he sends his own family to bow down before Esau 7 times. That is when Esau breaks into a dead sprint, headed straight for Jacob. He grabs him by the neck and kisses him. Esau embraces Jacob, and Jacob embraces Esau, and they weep as brothers. Esau said he heard of Jacob's coming and wanted to help him get back safely to Canaan. They leave from there, and they all go safely to Shechem. At Shechem, God calls Jacob to build an altar to him at Bethel. When Jacob receives this message from God, the God of his father's house, he commands everyone in his household to destroy their idols, to purify themselves, and to make the trip to the house of God. You see, when Jacob and his family get to Bethel, God shows up. He reminds Jacob, which, remember, means deceiver, of his new name, Israel, meaning struggled against God. He says that he is El Shaddai, meaning God Almighty. Finally, El Shaddai reminds Jacob of the blessing he gave to his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham, that the offspring of Jacob will be numerous. He need not strive for that. Coming from his lineage will be many nations. Here, Jacob sets up a pillar and anoints it with oil, representing the Spirit of God dwelling. On the return journey home, Rachel goes into labor with Jacob's 12th and final child. But as she's giving birth, she dies. As she's breathing her last breath, she calls out that her son's name is to be Ben-Oni, meaning son of my sorrow. But Jacob cannot. He calls him Ben-Jamin, the son of my right hand. When the family is settled back in the land of Shechem, Isaac dies, and Jacob and Esau, like Isaac and Ishmael, bury their father as brothers. Jacob is finally beginning to bring to close themes set up in the book of Genesis that will launch us through the rest of the biblical epic, and so it's good to talk about them. God's desire to bless humanity will not be thwarted by sin and corruption. Even while humanity spurs chaos into the world and stirs up sin in their very own hearts. But one day, God will not have to use a sinful human to bring blessing into the world. Because from the lineage of Jacob will come another man who will be wounded. But he will be wounded not because of his sins, but because of our own. His blessing will radiate out through the cosmos, filling creation with God's Eden blessing. This was Bible Unbound. We'll see you next time.